Thank you, everybody. This is part of our Parsippany Library series. So we're trying to do a series every week and communicate or do some training or outreach on specific topics that are relevant to sustainability. But the Parsippany Green Team, the mission of our team is to collaborate with our residents, town government, and business community to identify and implement programs that improve our quality of life and the physical, environmental, and financial sustainability of our community. So we operate within the context of the Sustainable Jersey program, which is a points-based program. You complete actions and get points and then get awarded a specific certification each year. So we started this in 2019. This specific goal is 150 points for this certification round in 2021. Next year is going to be silver for 350 points. And then we're also going for gold in energy, which is a 2023 goal. So the program is really set within the context of multiple areas of sustainability across animals. You can see all the categories here of brownfields, diversity and equity, health, green design, energy, food, waste management, natural resources. So there really is something for everybody. And we encourage volunteers to participate and get involved at a citizen level, as well as participating and offering any time that they have. Even a little bit counts in this large sustainability action plan. So, but that being said, I will pause. And if there are any questions, you can email parsippanygreenteam@gmail.com.
So, hi everyone. My name's Heather, and I am going to be presenting on road salt and its impact on our watershed. And I am an AmeriCorps New Jersey Watershed Ambassador. And just a little note, I created this presentation that I adapted from a presentation by Debbie Kratzer at the NJDEP. So I just wanted to give her some credit because she definitely put a lot of these slides together for me. But a little introduction about myself and our program. Again, I'm Heather, and I serve through AmeriCorps, which is a national network of service programs where American citizens such as myself serve in their communities to help solve critical needs. And our program, the Watershed Ambassador Program, is focused on the environment and specifically our freshwater resources. And we focus on solving the critical need of our freshwater resources in our environment by doing presentations like I'm doing today, engaging the community and doing outreach and planning partnership projects such as cleanups or tree plantings or rainbow workshops. And then we also go out and monitor our local stream health and train others to do that as well. So I mentioned this is the Watershed Ambassador Program. So what watershed are we in? In New Jersey, we split our watershed into 20 watershed management areas, and Parsippany falls into WMA 6. So here it is. It's the Rockaway, Whippany, and Upper Passaic watershed. And here's a little bit closer up map showing the different rivers because a watershed is the land area that drains into our water bodies. So everything that we do on our land is going to impact the water and our water quality through stormwater runoff. And as that water runs along the land surface, it picks up different things that are on the ground, which include pollutants and litter and all kinds of things. And that then ends up in our waterways. And here's a closer, more detailed map of our watershed. Here we are. And you can see it looks like we fall within the Whippany River basin, and that will drain into the lower Passaic River, which is this green line, and then eventually out into, I believe, the Newark Bay. So what are we here to talk about? Today we're talking about road salt. Something I want everyone to remember is that we are not advocating for stopping the use of road salt because it is important and effective at keeping us safe in the wintertime. It's been in use for decades, and it's been in use because it is effective at keeping us safe. We just want to talk about how we can use it in a way that's more environmentally friendly and not excessively. So we started using road salt in around 1940. And back then in the United States, we were using around 164,000 tons. And now we're up to over 24 million tons. So the use has increased significantly over time. This picture here on the right is a picture I took myself right outside my front door Hopefully we can all see that it's a lot of road salt. And actually we're going to see a graphic later that shows us that's significantly more than what is actually needed to melt the ice. And then anything beyond that was just going to kind of stay on the road and then end up in our storm drains, which drain right out into our waterways. So we're going to talk a lot about the negative consequences of road salt, which include damage to our infrastructure, possibly corroding our pipes, and then leading to expensive repairs. The corrosion can also happen to our vehicles, and there's a lot of potential degradation that could happen with our ecosystems. So it can harm our aquatic life, disrupt the food chain, and alter the reproduction of frogs and certain fish. And then, of course, us, our drinking water. So just a quick note about the chemical compound that's typically found in road salt, which is sodium chloride. Sodium is a positive ion, and it is less soluble in water. So when road salt dissolves, the sodium will kind of stick around in the soil or kind of wherever it lands. That's where it will bind. But the chloride dissolves in the water very easily. So that will stick with the water wherever it runs off to, which will often be our water bodies. So when we are measuring the impacts in the waterways, we're going to either measure the chloride levels, the total dissolved solids, or the specific conductivity. And I put a little paragraph here about what exactly is specific conductivity, because this came up the last time and I wanted to make sure I gave an accurate answer. But it's basically the ability of water to conduct electricity, which captures all ions, not just sodium and chloride. But since this is one of the most common dissolved solids in our water, we can kind of use the specific conductivity versus the chloride, which is going to be the compound that's dissolved in water, and use a special equation to determine kind of what's in there. And you can do the same thing with total dissolved solids, but just know this is a way to ascertain how much of this compound is in our water. So let's talk more specifically about the different impacts in our lakes. When we have increased salinity, it can cause the water column to become stratified, which means it would have different layers of density, because saltwater is more dense than fresh water. And that will prevent the water itself from mixing in its natural mixing cycle, which will prevent the oxygen from being well distributed, as well as nutrients. So they might be less available to organisms that live in there, like insects and fish. In our streams, we're seeing higher levels of chloride in our urbanized areas that have higher levels and percentages of impervious surfaces. And what I learned is that during periods of drought, our streams actually will feed our groundwater. And that's important because groundwater is often a source for drinking water. In fact, half of the United States, I believe the city of Parsippany, and half of the world actually relies on our groundwater for its drinking water. And actually the opposite happens more often than not, where the groundwater will feed our streams. So if the groundwater is polluted, then our streams will become polluted. And then lastly, our drinking water. When our chloride levels reach over 250 milligrams per liter, that's when our water starts to taste salty. And if we have kind of hidden salt in our water, that can be really damaging to those who have health impairments that require them to be on a low salt diet. So my sister is a nutritionist, so this is something that is very important to me and that I know very well. It's important for those people to really maintain their sodium levels, and this could be a hidden source. And then again, increasing our chloride levels can make the corrosiveness of our pipes increase, which can end up with leaching lead and copper, especially if we have older pipes, and that's very harmful to our health if we're drinking that water. And then our aquatic life. Once we start to increase our salinity in our water, that can really be harmful to freshwater organisms because their bodies are really only meant to live in freshwater and might not be able to handle the additional salinity. That can cause eggs to become affected and small organisms at the bottom of the food chain, like zooplankton. And then when you start to increase the salinity, that will reach the larger organisms like fish and amphibians and macroinvertebrates. And even if we're harming just the lowest level of our food chain, that can kind of lead to what's called a trophic cascade, where there's just not enough food at the low level, and then kind of that goes up the whole food chain and kind of causes a collapse. So in our soils, like I mentioned before, sodium will bind to the soil particles. Once it gets in there, that starts to impact our soil structure and chemistry, making it more alkaline and compacted. This impacts the nutrient availability of the soil to plants and kills the soil bacteria, which in turn increases erosion. And when we have increased erosion in our watershed, that leads to increased sediment loads in our streams, which can clog up the waterways and reduce the habitat availability for macroinvertebrates and fish to live, and then again be harmful to those organisms. And our plants, just like aquatic animals and those kinds of things, plants also only have a certain salinity tolerance. So if we start to increase the salinity that they're having to deal with, they could die. It could just impact the reproduction of that plant and the growth, but ultimately it's not good, especially in aquatic plants. And then when we start to lose these native plants, especially those that are close to our roadways, they might be replaced by invasive species, which aren't meant to live in our ecosystems, but are more adapted to different conditions. And then they could start to take over. And then lastly, our infrastructure. Salt is corrosive, can lead to the potholes. I know I don't drive that often anymore with the pandemic, but I had to leave my house the other day and my mind was blown by the potholes on the road, and salt is partially to blame for that. And then repairing these things can be very expensive. So important to know, in Parsippany Troy Hills, we get our water there from the groundwater. And once our groundwater starts to get salty, it's very difficult to remove it. So you might need to use something called physical filtration or desalination through reverse osmosis or distillation. So over here is a big fancy reverse osmosis desalination plant that's in Spain. And these facilities often have to be very large scale, very energy intensive, and very expensive. So what's the best solution? We can try to keep the salt from getting there in the first place. So now I'm going to go through some maps and figures and graphs, and all of this data was taken from the 2016 integrated report, which is from the DEP, and then also the 303D list of impaired water bodies. And then that data was adapted into these figures. So this map shows 24 subwatersheds and 4 subwatersheds that were found to be impaired due to total dissolved solids and chloride. And I included this because it's right here. A lot of them, most of them, are right in our area. So this is definitely a problem for us. And then statewide, it's also trending upwards, both the concentrations of total dissolved solids and our chloride in our water since 1997 through 2018. The little red dotted line is showing us our trend line, and both of them are trending upwards. And these two little figures show us our exceedances of water quality standards. So what that means is there's more in there than what is considered okay. So then that makes it impaired. So these little dots show us the percent of that year that the samples came back impaired. And for total dissolved solids, that would have to be over 500 milligrams per liter, and chloride over 230 milligrams per liter. And both, again, trending upwards kind of significantly over those years. And then this one I find pretty powerful because this is breaking it down by month, total dissolved solids and chloride. It's really, really small, but we have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. So both of these parameters you can see are significantly higher in the winter months. And now we're going to look at our pristine watershed, which is kind of an example of what might happen naturally, because this stream that was chosen is the Dunfield Creek. It's shown here in this picture. It's pretty far removed from impervious surfaces. It has a nice forest cover, and so we can kind of make the assumption that this stream might not be impacted by the road salts. So over here on our graph, the purple and blue bars are showing different precipitation, snow and rain. And the specific conductance here in the red is really not changing much in response. It's really hovering right around 30. But if we compare Dunfield Creek, our pristine creek over here, to Rockaway Creek, which was chosen because it is in a highly urbanized area, it's showing significant spikes that seem to be right in response to the precipitation bars. So it's very interesting. And what might we ascertain from this is that the increased impervious cover is probably leading to more road salt, and we're showing that in our differences in specific conductance. So now what can we do? The first thing we're going to talk about is monitoring our local streams. So this is an awesome project that's going on statewide called the New Jersey Watershed Watch Network. And they have a road salt monitoring program that is very easy to get involved in. All you have to do if you're interested in doing this is choose your stream, request free test strips on the website, and then take 4 to 6 samples, 2 to 3 in dry weather, and then 2 to 3 in wet weather. So dry weather would be 72 hours or more after precipitation, and wet weather would be within 48 hours of snow or rain or snow melt. And then you just submit your data on the website. So this is a more detailed breakdown of that process. You would just find a small glass or plastic cup, rinse it in the stream 3 times, fill the cup with about 1 inch of water, and then you place a little test strip, which is shown here in the corner, in that inch of water, making sure you don't submerge the top. You leave it in there for about 10 minutes, and then you just take a picture of your strip against this conversion chart, and then you upload that to the website. And then using the conversion chart, you can see the parts per million based on where the little white peak ends up, which I'll show closer on the next slide. The next slide after this. Okay, so here's me doing my salt samples. I serve in a different watershed. So this is the Rahway River, which is my watershed. I went out to take my sample. To do it, I taped just a cup to a broomstick that I had laying around using some duct tape. And then here I am rinsing it 3 times. And then I'm dipping it in my 1 inch of water, and I leave it there for about 10 minutes. After that, we have, this is my little result. This strip was fully orange before I submerged it, but now we have this kind of off-white yellow peak formed, and it's stopping around 4. So then you can look over here and see that 4 will equal 161 parts per million. So then I could submit the picture and that result here on the road salt website. And that is it. And then you just go back out 4 to 6 times. And I just included pictures of my fellow ambassadors doing this as well, because they have different methods. This is Amanda. She's just dipping it in by hand. Her stream is very easily accessible. And then Tyler over here has a much harder to access stream with very steep banks. So he is lowering a bucket with a rope and doing this exact same process. It's just safer that way. So we definitely want to preach safety first. So if you do choose to do this, whatever's safest for you, never put yourself in danger for road salt sampling. Okay, so some frequently asked questions about this process. If you do this and the peak is below the lowest level on the website, record 0. If it's higher than the highest, you would enter 1,000. Dry weather should be a week from the previous dry weather samples, so they should be a week apart. And then we definitely want to say, do not go out during winter weather if you're going to do this. The wet weather should just be when it's safe and practical to go out after precipitation. And then all samples should be from the same site, and safety first. Okay, so probably the most important thing is to educate, and that's ourselves and others. These graphics were taken from the Wisconsin Saltwise website, which is at the bottom, and I highly recommend visiting it if you're interested in using these graphics in some way for education, but they have a lot of really interesting information that's super helpful, like this one down here where it says it takes only 1 teaspoon of salt to permanently pollute 5 gallons of water, which is a pretty powerful statistic. And then over here, I really love this. It gives you very easy instructions on how to use our sidewalk salt at home, where we clear off the snow first with a shovel by hand or a snowblower if you got the technology. And then we want to scatter. And if you see here, and the next graphic shows it even closer, these little pellets are pretty far apart. So it takes only 1 coffee mug of salt to treat an entire 20-foot driveway or 10 sidewalk squares. So a lot less than you might think. And then if the temperatures drop below 15 degrees, salt won't even work. So you might want to switch to something else, such as sand or a different ice melter. So this is the close-up of how far away the little rocks need to be in order to be effective. So they're pretty spread out. Again, shovel, scatter, switch. And I really like this one. Same website, the Wisconsin Saltwise. And these ones are from Minnesota Clean Water. And they include a 4th step, which is to sweep. So sweep up whatever's left over so that doesn't end up in the storm drain. So I like that a lot. And then you can just reuse whatever you sweep up. So there's also large scale things you can do. These next few slides, I got a lot of information from Adirondack Action and again, Wisconsin Saltwise, who are organizations who've done a lot of research into this topic. And they've come up with these different best management practices. So these are just some ideas of what they recommend. First, they recommend the anti-icing brines, which I hope we've all seen those little lines on the road, which are when they apply these brines before a snowstorm. So this is containing less salt. It can be more cost effective because of that, because we're not using as much salt, and it's shown to melt the snow and ice faster. And they stops the spread of the salt by scatter and bounce. That might happen if you can imagine a bunch of salt being dropped from the same time, those little pellets just kind of bouncing everywhere. But they did include this important disclaimer here that liquids have less melting power than granular products, and they recommend proper training chemicals and equipment. So very important. But I think this is cool. Like, I didn't know before researching this that there's equipment available that you can hook up to like your own pickup truck if you had a driveway you wanted to de-ice, and then also a sidewalk version. So very cool. You could also make the leap to track your equipment to kind of know where your salt is being distributed and prevent overlap. So up in the Adirondacks, they're using GPS trackers to tell where their trucks are going. And they're like communicating and using local weather forecasts to anticipate snow and ice to use those anti-icing brine solutions, which contain less salt. And they have live edge plows that better conform to their street side. So they're really doing it all. And then over here, this slide has all of the practices that they do. So this is, obviously a lot, but they're really taking this problem on head on. So they've put a lot of time, effort, and expense into solving this problem. If you're interested, the website's here at the bottom. Definitely check out all of the things you could do. But they even have vehicle-based sensor technologies with multiple dispersal bins and alternative de-icing or anti-icing options. So you could really get super high-tech with this if you wanted to. So all of these options are available. But here's what is available in New Jersey that I was able to find. I found this in the Highway Agency guidance document on the DEP's website. If you go down to Chapter 11, the optional measures, there's a whole best management practices section on highway de-icing and how to do it in a way that has a minimal harm to ecosystems and roads. So that's, something to check out if you wanted to look more into this and what we can do in New Jersey. So in summary, road salts do increase our safety on sidewalks and roads in the winter, but increased use is causing damage to our roads, ecosystems, and bridges. And we tend to be using more year after year. We can get involved if we're interested in monitoring this issue by joining the New Jersey Watershed Watch Network. And we can influence behavior of ourselves and others through education and changing our behavior, and even these large scale changes that are an option as well. And these are my resources, and that is it. So if we have any questions, definitely let us know.
Are there any compounds that have provided good alternatives other than salt?
I don't know necessarily, because I know that some of my coworkers looked into this as well. And it seems like all of the alternatives also have kind of their own drawbacks. Like I know that there's magnesium chloride and calcium chloride that are kind of also like road salt options. But
Yeah,
they
those
still
are
contain
chlorides.
they
though.
still have the chloride, so that I'm
Right.
sure that's still going to end up in the water and the
Right.
ecosystems. And then I heard about beet juice, but
I've
then
heard about that too.
yeah, but then
Wait,
you're adding
beet
nutrients.
juice?
Yes.
Beet juice. Then you might,
BET.
yeah,
Yes.
end up with the excess nutrients getting into the stream, and nutrients,
Right.
lead to algae growth, and then you get harmful algal blooms. And
Right.
so I haven't heard anything that's like absolutely foolproof, beyond just like not regulating, but just kind of watching how much is applied.
So about stream adoption, do you give us a map of the streams that you would want the samples drawn from?
So that's a great question. If I can pull up the website, but there's a map on there. It's an ArcGIS map, where you can kind of see where other people are submitting their samples. But if you were interested in spreading out, I guess that would be kind of a way to narrow down like where someone else is in your watershed and pick maybe like a different stream location. Chances are there's a lot of streams open, because New Jersey is a big state and watersheds have so many little rivers and streams, that if you have like a stream that's kind of convenient for you, you can kind of maybe just type in the coordinates and see if they match up with someone else. And if not, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think they're going to be continuing this program for a few years. So even though the winter's kind of coming to an end, hopefully this year, they should be running this again next year. So it's definitely something to keep in mind if you're interested in this issue. And it's cool to have the actual data.